Welcome to Type Tune Tint. I'm Tom Kranz. Superheroes and supervillains are the purview of today's guest, Bob Budiansky, a comic book artist, writer, and editor who contributed to creating the towering Transformers, supervised the Spiderman franchise, and left his mark in the Marvel Comics universe for 20 years. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Type Tune Tint for 2023. And it's a good one today. We are in the tint part of Type Tune Tint, which usually means an artist, visual arts. And joining me today is, as I said in my intro, Bob Budiansky. Bob is a neighbor of mine here in Fanwood, New Jersey. In addition to being a talented career artist and graphic designer, he currently holds the position of recreation director for our town, which is actually a huge job because he basically oversees a boatload of programs from pickleball lessons to drawing classes to pretty much the use of our recreation buildings. But we're here to talk mostly about his art, how he got started in his art. And Bob, first of all, hi and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Tom. Happy to be here.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm speaking to Bob. We're both in our palatial estates in Fanwood, New Jersey today, coming up on the new year here today. Bob, I was really fascinated by one of the courses that he did for in his capacity as recreation director that passed in May of 2022. He did a course called Comic Book Art, or the Art of Comics. And I said, what could that possibly be? And so I showed up and I learned all kinds of things about Bob that you're going to learn today in this podcast episode. Bob spent 20 years at Marvel Comics, doing everything from drawing to editing to writing. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to show you some samples of things that Bob has done. My first question is, how did you get started as an illustrator and in art? Was it a kid thing? Did you always know you wanted to do it, or did you just pick up pencils and markers and paints when you were 5, or when did that start?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it there in your question. I basically started when I was around 5 or maybe earlier. I just liked to draw, and I just drew all the time when I was growing up. And I read comic books, and I used to copy images out of the comics, come up with my own comic books. My mom would buy me pads of typewriter paper when typewriter paper came in pads, when there were such things as typewriters. And I would just go through those pads and make up my own stories and draw them and from beginning to end, and use up a pad and get another pad and another pad and so on. And so I just loved to draw when I was a little kid, and I just continued drawing up until I worked at Marvel. I was working for my college newspaper as a graphic arts editor and an artist doing illustrations for the newspaper, which came out 3 times a week. So my hobby as a kid turned into my extracurricular activity by the time I got to college, and then I soon got a job at Marvel.
So as a kid, drawing and painting and doing, whatever your art wanted you to do, did you find yourself being nurtured by your family and by teachers? Is this something that you were encouraged to do, or was, the message you got, you can't make a living at that, go be a pipe fitter or something?
No, I would say I certainly got support. Like I said, my mom was more than willing to walk over to Woolworth with me to get another pad of typewriter paper whenever I was running out. And I was kind of an object of fascination among my cousins because I was the youngest of all my first cousins. And so I was this kid who always drew, and I wasn't like professional grade artist, but compared to all the other cousins, I guess I was pretty good. So like, oh, look, Bob's drawing this and he's drawing that, and so everybody loved what I was doing. And throughout school, I remember in high school, and I went to Bronx High School of Science, which is not known for its art programs, but I remember, like I would be doodling in class, and my social studies teacher would come over and look at it and say, "You're not supposed to be doing that. And that's pretty good." Doodling in the margins of my notebooks or whatever. So, I mean, I never had anybody push back against me drawing. It was just the opposite. But on the other hand, I never thought I would make a living out of it. As I got a little older into high school, I thought, well, so I went to I went to Bronx Science. I thought I'd be a civil engineer when I grew up.
Oh, really? So you went to school, you didn't go to college for art per se, then, correct?
My degree is I have a bachelor's of engineering and civil engineering, and
Really?
I stayed 1 year for a master's program in transportation engineering. I remember in junior high school, I decided I want to be a comic book artist when I grew up. When I got to high school, I thought, well, that's unrealistic. I'll follow my older brother's foot path. He was an electrical engineer. I like civil engineering, so I'll study that. So I got to college, I studied civil engineering, and then I started doing a master's program after I graduated, and then I dropped out.
You dropped out, but you went to work, correct?
Right. I got a job at Marvel Comics, an entry level editorial position.
And so, working at Marvel Comics, and what year was that? We talking 60s?
May 76.
Okay, so that must have been quite a rush getting a job at Marvel Comics. I mean, it was Marvel and DC Comics in those days, basically, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That was the big two, and yeah, it was great. Like, it was kind of a dream come true. Like I said, in junior high, I aimed to become a comic book artist, and then I kind of put that on the put that on the side, thinking that's not going to happen. It's not realistic. Who does that for a living? And then it came about that I got a job there. I had a half-hour interview over the telephone. I was in Buffalo, New York, and the Marvel's based in Manhattan, still is. And so I get on the phone with my soon-to-be boss, and he's interviewing me. And he said, "Well," and I visited the offices once or twice over the holidays prior to that, and my prospective boss said, "Well, I really wish I could meet you in person, but a couple of guys here said they know you, and they say good things about you." So after a half-hour interview, I got the job. And I was on a Wednesday, and in May of 76, and the following Monday I was working there.
So you got a job over the phone, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. Never met my boss until I walked in the office.
Wow,
My boss is a guy named Larry Lieber, who's still with us. Wonderful guy. His brother is Stan Lee.
Oh, that's Stan Lee.
That's Stan Lee. Yeah, but
Mr. Spiderman.
His younger brother, Larry Lieber, was my first.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So another thing I learned at the class that you gave, and I've got a photograph of you doing that. You held up one of your Transformer covers. One person kind of did the drawing part, and then other people did the coloring part, or what you call, is that the inking part?
Well, inking and coloring are two different things.
So there's this picture of you showing the class your drawing of a Transformer cover on the left there, and on the right you see the colored part in there. You did which?
So basically, I was a pencil artist. So the pencil artist is not to brag, it's the primary artist of any piece of comic book artwork. The pencil artist is the guy who conceives, or the guy or gal who conceives of what the artwork is going to look like and draws what that artwork is going to be in pencil. And then it goes to an ink artist. An ink artist, I hate to use the word trace because that's what people think it is, but each inker is a very talented artist, him or herself, and they bring their own particular style in finishing the artwork. So they take that gray pencil art, they put black India ink over the pencil art to bring it to the foreground, give it life, really pump it up. And then the coloring is a completely different job, goes to a color artist. Nowadays, with so much being done on computers, sometimes those jobs get merged a bit more. Like, from what I understand, ink artists aren't as primary as it used to be.
You were the editor on the very first Transformers mini series in 1984. And was essentially the debut of the Transformers comic book?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes. So
okay. And so then that's what you were most associated with, would you say?
It turned out that way. It wasn't like that was like 7 years after I started at Marvel. So I had done a lot of other things prior to that popping up. And then I did a lot of things after that. But in November of 83, I was an editor. I was no longer an entry-level editor. I was a full editor. My boss, Jim Shooter, who's the editor-in-chief, came to me and said, we have this toy property we want to develop into a comic book. You're going to be the editor of the miniseries. So the miniseries is sort of like a tryout. We don't know if these things are going to take off or not. Somebody at Marvel, the publisher, or somebody makes a deal with an outside partner. In this case, Hasbro Toys, and Hasbro says, okay, we have this new toy. It's going to be great, and they make a deal, and Marvel says, okay, we'll put out a comic book. So after 4 issues of, which is what I edited, of Transformers comic book in the early 84, it was decided that it was a big hit. There's a whole history of Transformers. So basically Hasbro went to, this has nothing to do with me or Marvel for that matter. Hasbro went to Japan, I guess. There were 2 Japanese toy companies called Bandai and Takara, who were already putting out these robotic toys that transformed into various forms, like jet fighters and cars and all sorts of other things. And basically what Hasbro did was made some kind of deal where they just took these toys that already existed and rebranded them as the Transformers.
Okay.
Then they came to Marvel and said, Marvel, we want you to come up with a story that create a story that explains who these characters are, and then develop it into a comic book. And then separately, we want to develop it into an animated television show. And it was a whole multi-pronged media effort on Hasbro's part. And Marvel's part was to develop the story. And then it eventually came to me to develop the characters and edit the comic book.
So then Transformers became a regular monthly comic book like many others.
Yes.
And you ended up writing most of the next 51 issues of the regular comic book. By writing, does that mean you actually wrote, not only came up with the story and the pencil drawings, but you actually wrote the copy and the stuff in the balloons? Or what does that mean that you wrote?
Well, writing is, you're writing a story. So yeah, I came up with the plots and I wrote the dialogue. I did not draw the comic book. I drew some of the covers.
I got you.
Yeah, I did draw a few covers here and there, but I left it to other artists to handle the monthly chore of drawing a comic book, which I would have found impossible since I was a full-time editor.
Oh, really? Why? Because just of time?
No, yeah, time. Yeah. Drawing a comic book for most artists is a full-time. If it's a monthly comic book, it's a full-time job. So
that's drawing every single one of those cells is a separate drawing, I'm guessing.
Well, here, this is, I don't know. This is a page of comic book artwork.
Okay.
These are panels. So a page like this would take me, this is Ghost Rider, it's not Transformers. A page like this could take me a day to draw.
Is that right? So an entire comic book would take a week, say?
No, entire comic book would take a month. Some artists are faster than others.
Okay.
But to draw a full comic book, 20 to 22 pages, do the math. There's 30 days in a month with weekends off, hopefully. That's a month's work.
More with Bob Budiansky in just a moment.
Hey, Type Tune Tint listeners. My name is Paul Farvar, and I'm the host of the Singles Only Podcast. Singles Only Podcast is where I interview guests, mostly comedians, sometimes actors, musicians, authors, and sometimes just your average Joe. They tell us about their dating lives, their relationship goals and journeys, often hilarious, sometimes serious, always entertaining. Give it a try. It's only about 30 minutes of your time. You got nothing to lose, everything to gain. Singles Only Podcast available everywhere you podcast, everywhere you listen to Type Tune Tint. You can also find Singles Only Podcast or go to singlesonlypodcast.com to find out more. Find out why the Chicago Reader voted Singles Only Podcast the best podcast last year. singlesonlypodcast.com. Thank you.
Another one of the distinctions under your belt here is that you edited or oversaw Spiderman for a number of years.
So when you're an editor, you are responsible for the creative team that is on the book and for guiding the overall story arc. So you want your writer to really come up with all of this material, not you. Now, in the case of Spider-Man, by the time I became the editor of the Spider-Man comic book, it was not just a comic book. There were 4 different Spider-Man titles a month. There were related titles that came out every month that were part of the greater Spider-Man family. So basically, I was overseeing about a dozen titles a month, and I had a staff of probably a half a dozen other editors assisting in getting these books out.
Here's an artist question. What is different about comic book art than other forms of art, than doing regular still lifes or doing portraits or doing anything else?
If you're doing a portrait, you are doing a portrait based on somebody who's either sitting in front of you or a photograph of that person. Comic books, most artists do draw from memory. They don't have a person sitting in front of them or whatever. They're drawing cars and planes and people and as you know, comic book art, especially superhero art, can be very kinetic. So they're creating all of these almost impossible to duplicate actions on the part of a lot of these characters as they go through their motions. And they're doing it all out of their head. And not completely. Like, there's nothing wrong with referring to a photograph of an actual jet airplane if you have to draw a real jet airplane. But basically, comic book artists are coming up with all of this stuff out of their own training, that they know how to put all this material together and put it together to make a panel.
Well, training and imagination too, of course, right?
Of course, imagination. Yeah,
coming up with the ideas, and
that enters into the next part, which is the main thing that separates comic book art from other types of illustrative art is that you're telling a story. The pencil artist is telling a story. So what we call storytelling in the business. So you're acting as the equivalent of a movie director. You are staging this story, these different scenes, which are the same thing as panels of artwork. You're coming up with a way to communicate visually what the story is. To go from panel to panel to see what the character or characters are going through, to show their emotions, to show them interacting in different ways. Whatever the story demands, it's up to the artist to figure out how to depict that within these panels.
So it's akin to doing a storyboard for a movie director, for example.
Very much so. Yes. There's a lot. In fact, a lot of comic book artists have moved into storyboarding, and probably vice versa. Yes.
What most of Fanwood knows you for is the kind of the art that you practice now, which is you do a lot of flyers, you do posters, any one of the big events that you have that you promote. You basically promote yourself. You do your own artwork. And I guess I'm assuming that you're not actively drawing comic characters anymore. Am I correct in there?
Not quite. I do commission artwork. So people find me. This is on my desk. These are commission requests.
Oh, no kidding.
I have more here, and I have more on a list.
So people will ask you for a specific character or a specific
yeah,
look
exactly.
or something?
Yeah, it's like, a customer's always right. So whatever they want me to draw, I'm a hot pair of hired hands. If they want me to draw something and I feel capable of doing it, I'll do it. I mean, I'll do it very slowly because I have other things to do, but I'll get, eventually hopefully get around to drawing these different commissioned artwork.
So you did covers for Ghost Rider comics, correct?
I did covers. I eventually did the interiors as well.
Okay. And then you created, if I'm not mistaken here, the character of Sleepwalker, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And how did that, is that a comic book that's still available out there?
Sleepwalker came and went back in the early 90s.
Okay.
33 issues, which is almost 3 years.
Okay.
And he's popped up here and there as a guest star. He had a little mini series a few years ago. So it's varied over the years. I'm not really connected to it anymore.
I got it.
It's not like Marvel calls me up and says, "Hey, we want to use Sleepwalker in this way or that way. Is that okay with you?" They don't check with me.
But they did do they made an action figure, correct?
Yeah. So Marvel made a deal with Hasbro Toys. Again, I wasn't involved in the negotiations, but Hasbro comes out with these collectible Legend Series toys every so often, apparently. And earlier this year, in the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness collection, Sleepwalker appeared. There he is.
Well, that must be cool to see your creation live as a toy now, right?
Oh, it was great. Oh, I love it. Yes. I mean,
I'm sure you've gotten tons of royalties from that, correct?
I'm waiting for the check.
That's what I thought. Is that why you're still the recreation director in Fanwood,
I will.
Correct?
I do have a deal where I get something, but I haven't. I'm assuming at the end of the year they say they count up the money or whatever, and they cut me a check. But
oh, that's cool. So that was actually a toy that was available out there. I don't know if I'm not in the toy buying business anymore because my kids are older, but I think that's really cool. What so do commission artwork now,
Right.
but I also see that you go to a lot of the Comic-Con type conventions, and I'm guessing that you hook up there with friends and colleagues from your past life.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, that's one of the big appeals to going to these places. So yeah, I've been for the last I don't know, 15 years or so, I've been doing these convention gigs, and they're fun.
Well, the class that you conducted here in Fanwood for the recreation department was really great. It was one of the highlights of I do public information for our town here, and I take pictures and report on lots of these activities. And I was just fascinated by that whole thing. This was basically done in a recreation building. It was maybe 20, 25 kids, a couple of parents, and you basically demonstrated the art of, like, from the very beginning. And you had, even simple things like, drawing a circle and making it into a three-dimensional object, like not just a circle, but a ball, and doing things like making things three-dimensional. That was a very basic lesson, but it was like, that's like the basis of pretty much, everything you do. You're not just drawing flat panel, two-dimensional figures and heroes and scenes and whatnot. Did you enjoy that teaching thing? I got the feeling that you did, and I hope you do it again this coming year.
Oh yeah. I definitely enjoy sharing whatever I can with people who are interested in that subject. So in this case, how to draw comic books, and yeah, I have I have a ball doing it. I've taught classes, and I do these seminars, which is what you're talking about. Yeah, it's been fun. It's a nice skill to have, and I think a lot of people look at artwork like comic book artwork and can't imagine that somebody actually does this. And then
Right.
when I bring it to a class like this, I say, well, here's how you do it. It's not like it's not, it may be a secret. You may not know the basics, the fundamentals that go into this, but it's not magic either.
But they learn it's doable. You mentioned earlier it's a digital age now, and I'm guessing that pretty much most, if not all, comic book art or graphic book, whatever we call them now, is done on computers, and it's done with Adobe Illustrator and whatnot. Is that the case? And do you think that the art has suffered or gotten better as a result of that, the digitization of the art?
Well, there's different factors that go into digital artwork. So most artists still draw with a pencil, but many artists draw on a tablet. Either way, you need to be an artist. You can't have the computer do the work for you, although actually there is a new program out which is very controversial, which is creating artificial intelligence generated art.
Yeah, and writing artificial intelligence plots and movie plots too.
Right. That's a separate discussion. But
yeah, right. That's another podcast.
So some artists can draw on a tablet, which means that they're drawing directly digitally and right onto their computer monitor, basically. But where the artwork really becomes digitized is the coloring process. So whether you draw with a pencil and ink, or whether you draw on a tablet, at some point the comic book is going to get colored, and most coloring these days is done on a digital. So the artwork is scanned in when it's in the black and white form, scanned in to a computer if it's not already digitized through a tablet, and it's colored using Photoshop or a similar kind of coloring program.
So a lot of artists, even if they end up doing digital coloring, they will actually start by drawing with a pencil on a piece of white paper.
Yeah, whatever they feel comfortable doing. It's not like it has to be digital from the get-go. But at some point, it's going to be digitized when it gets to probably the coloring stage at the very least at the coloring stage. It'll be digitized, as well as the lettering, which used to be all hand lettering. That's all fonts that are created on a computer that are applied to the artwork.
I guess it's kind of comforting to me to know that even in the digital age, it still requires imagination, talent, the certain skills of an artist, even if you're using an electronic tablet. Bob, I will be seeing you around Fanwood. It's going to be another busy year for you, I'm sure, and for me as well. But I appreciate you spending some time with me here, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and it's been my pleasure to be here.
Hi, folks. Tom Krantz here. I appreciate you tuning in to my podcast, Type Tune Tint, and I especially appreciate those of you who have subscribed. I started this subscriber thing in July of 2024, really just as a way of recouping a little bit of the costs of doing this podcast. There's website hosting and there's WordPress additions, and occasionally I buy a book so that I can actually know what I'm talking about when I interview an author. You can subscribe to this podcast for as little as $3 a month. Comes off your credit card automatically. And for $3 a month, you get the satisfaction of knowing that you're helping keep this podcast going. I'm in my 5th year now, but also I will occasionally offer exclusive content just for subscribers. So give it a shot. I appreciate you taking the plunge. You can unsubscribe anytime you want. If you have any questions or comments, of course, you know how to get in touch. So please subscribe, and I appreciate it. Thanks.